Once again, as is a quarterly tradition now on the Business Breakfast, I'm speaking to Simon Baker. He's the Managing Director of Haus. They've crunched their quarterly numbers. We've been lucky enough to have a sneak peek at them. So let's see, amid much rumour about the real estate market, what Q1 actually looked like. And having said that, Simon, we need to start this discussion by saying we don't yet know what Q1 actually looked like, because a lot of Q1 activity won't be realised until Q2. Why so?
This is it, isn't it? So obviously Property Monitor, we use their data, and you speak quite regularly to them, don't you? So the data that comes from them is fantastic and it helps people make decisions. But of course that data only appears in the Q1 report if the property transferred in Q1. And that's what I mean by that is obviously all the properties that we might have agreed in the first 3 months of the year won't transfer until potentially Q2, so we've got to wait another 3 months again for all that.
But it also puts you in quite an important position, because it means that you know stuff that's not out there yet in the official data.
Yeah, hopefully. So obviously dealing with a broker that you trust and you know would obviously mean that they could tell you what's actually happened in the last 3 months. The deals we've agreed that tend to take somewhere between, say, 6 and 12 weeks before they transfer. So that's quite a useful data source.
It is. Do you see any change with the increasing volume of transactions? Does that window get longer or does it always stay the same?
It tends to stay similar. So obviously it depends if you're buying with cash or with finance. So it could be anything from maybe 2 or 3 weeks if it was really fast, all the way through to 12 or maybe even a little bit.
So what did Q1 look like? If you were to put it in one word, what is the word for the last quarter?
So I think in January we saw a slight price dip, right? Property Monitor mentioned I think it was about 0.5%. So, and that was, we were talking, is that an inflection point? Is that the start of a slowdown? And then actually from there we've seen it continued steady growth, which is really exciting. It's a sign of a maturing market. We've seen residential sales grow 37% year on year, which is really, really exciting. So that shows a maturing market, people stopping renting and starting to buy, end users, coming into the market here in Dubai.
So that slight dip, any idea what it was? Is that a Ramadan effect? What's your theory?
I mean, it could be multiple reasons. One could be the fact that when you're looking at a small data sample, different houses selling in a different month could be actually the reason potentially. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you do have to read into the data. It's great to have the information, but you also need to sort of digest that properly.
You mentioned end users. I've seen some data about less rentals. What are you seeing in terms of who's doing the actual buying, in terms of investors, buy to let, or in terms of the end users?
So in terms of rentals, that's an interesting one. The year on year, the rental volume has actually stayed quite similar, despite the fact that the prices have gone up 14%. So what does that mean?
And the population's increasing.
And the population's increasing. So what does that mean? It's signalling to us that a lot of those people who were renting maybe a year or 2 years ago are actually now becoming end users and buying themselves, which again is a sign of a maturing market. Last year there was more off-plan transactions than there were resale transactions. And this year we've actually seen residential sales increase in volume above off-plan, which again is a sign of a maturing market, and I think it's positive for the future.
How do those end users buy compared to investors? How sensitive are they to things like mortgage rates? What does it mean for the actual shape of the market and how it works?
I mean, certainly in terms of mortgage rates, obviously we saw a spike, didn't we? After a very low, the lows of COVID kind of times, it shot up and it's sort of stabilised. And I think people have accepted that sort of around the 4% mark for someone who lives here is about what they're going to be paying for.
Okay. You guys look at 38 communities in your report.
Yeah.
I do not have time to talk about 38 communities with you, but I do want you to pick out some that are particularly interesting, that maybe reflect a trend or show us a trend to come.
Okay, so certainly a lot of the established communities were the ones that probably led the price charge in the last few years. Excuse me. And more recently, we've seen more up-and-coming developments. So, for example, Furjan is an interesting one. There's lots of good value. There's lots of good opportunities there that we've started appearing. New developments such as Tilal, Ghaf, as now they're handing over more properties. That's certainly becoming a place that end users are looking to. Once the property's ready, they can go and get a mortgage up to 80%. So some of these communities are really starting to come into their own and compete with the originals like maybe Springs and Meadows, Arabian Ranches.
Presumably they've got nicer, flashier, newer amenities as well.
Yeah, so I think, they've recently announced in Tilal Ghaf they're going to have a new beach club there, which is quite amazing, really, is in the middle of the desert, isn't it? So, and they've obviously got the Crystal Lagoon there. They've got lots of different bits that are quite unique from maybe an old Emaar community.
What are you seeing happen to prices? And I realise this is the question. It's like, how long is a piece of string?
Yeah.
But what are you seeing happen to prices when they are being sold once a property's physical or close to physical?
Yeah, so what tends to happen is, people buy off plan. Lots of investors are buying off plan with a view to sell to an end user in the future. And you typically see quite the chunk of the price appreciation just in that last 6 months until handover, because it becomes more relevant to more people. Suddenly upon handover, you can get a mortgage for 80%, whereas before they might have had to pay all cash for it. So that's probably where the change comes at that point.
One of the other things this report says, and it surprised me, is you suggest looking at commercial property as an investment.
Yeah.
Why have you popped that in this
Okay,
report?
so I think obviously in Dubai it's always been predominantly residential properties that have always led the way. And actually more recently, since everyone's got back to work after COVID, we thought that might all change, but actually people are back in offices. And they haven't launched very many office buildings in the last few years. So I think that demand's going to be there for the next few years to come. And the supply's quite low. So I think there's an opportunity in that as well.
How would I do that? I mean, can I do that as just a general punter?
Yeah, I mean, any punter could go and buy an office to, as an investment. Of course, some office space tends to be larger sizes. So if you wanted to buy like a whole floor in a tower, for example, you might not be looking at 1 or 2 million. You might be looking at 20 or 30 million. So it may well be a better investor for the more seasoned, high net worth individuals. But you could still buy a small office if you wanted to, and maybe that's worth exploring if that's an option,
Diversification.
Yeah.
Tell me, where are we going for more? For all 38 communities?
So all 38 communities, we can't talk about them all right now, can we? But it's great that we've our data team put together this information so that 1 or 2 of those may be relevant to you. You probably don't want to read all 38. You probably want to pick the one that you think, oh, there's my house. Let's see how it's doing. So yeah, that's the idea of it. And on top of the 38 communities, we've got an off-plan report as well, which gives all the breakdown for everything that's happening in the off-plan market. So hopefully people can read into that, pick the ones they want to look at, and really sort of get a better understanding of the market. And then obviously they can reach out if they want specific data. So for example, you're looking at Arabian Ranches, rather than the whole of Arabian Ranches, you might really want to know, how much an Al Reap's going for example. So
how granular do you get?
Yeah, well, we can dive into specific types, number of bedrooms. So if you had a house or an apartment and you wanted to know what the real value was today, then we can try and get very, very specific data specific to your building, your community, number of bedrooms, size, and even view. So it's all of that information.
Simon, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.